Today we're going to take a look at the newest Senran Kagura game, Senran Kagura Reflexions. It might be the first game of the franchise for the Nintendo Switch, though it's not the first to be on a Nintendo console. It's a dating sim that makes full use of the Switch's haptic feedback and motion controls, and it's a spin-off rather than a mainline title. It received a lot of attention when it was first released in Japan, just because you can touch girls virtually with it. Also in Japan it's called Senran Kagura Reflexions, so it's good that they renamed it to something a bit easier to pronounce. For anyone who doesn't know, Senran Kagura is a franchise that follows the adventures of a group of ninja girls. The main series is a hack and slasher, but the series has dabbled with a couple of spin-offs, like a rhythm game and a third-person shooter. At this point in the video, I'm sure the amount of fan service is apparent, so it should come to no surprise to hear that Reflections contains lots of it. This game is really quite different from any of the past in the series. The whole ninja thing isn't really part of the gameplay, but it is part of the story, even though there isn't really much of a story. The point is that you, the nameless and faceless protagonist, gets to interact with Asuka or Yumi if you want to spend more money, through a small set of ecchi minigames. And perhaps there will be other characters later on, as there are more characters in the Japanese version. Due to the power of something called reflexology, the player somehow connects with the girls' hearts, which brings about certain dream sequence situations. There's a specific linearity that you go through as you play. First, you massage her hands. You can select each of the fingers as well as the palms. You can move around with the analog sticks to select where you want to focus your attention to. She won't always like what you're doing, so just move around to another finger until you can feel her heartbeat through the Joy-Con. We'll talk about the HD rumble stuff a bit later, by the way. That's when you get into the dream sequence. So whatever happens here isn't real life. Not that the previous part was real life or anything. I think you know what I mean. There's a number of different situations you can find yourself in, which the game calls arcs. If you watch or have seen anime, then you'll recognize a lot of these scenarios. Tutor and student, schoolgirl caught in the rain, generic fantasy setting, idol thingy, etc. It's kind of fun because of the fact that they're so cliché. After the brief cutscene, you have to basically feel your way up to the minigame. Touching different places has an effect on the mood, which I'll touch on later. Then you go to the final part of the arc, which is a minigame. Basically, you have to massage Asuka or Yumi until a meter fills up. You have to keep a steady pace, not too slow or fast, but just right in the middle. It's not hard at all, and I've never had a problem with running out of time. Once you've reached satisfactory results, affection increases and you keep doing all the different arcs over and over again until the love gauge is maxed out and you unlock a part of her heart. As you play, you'll unlock a few more massage items. You start off with your hands, then a roller, a brush, until you finally unlock the massager. Yes, that's what that is. There really isn't all that much to it. Depending on which item you use, you have to do different motions, but you can use traditional controls as well. For me, the motion controls are a novelty that wears off quickly, mostly because it feels so wonky. Except for the hands, it actually works fine there. The animations can be pretty funny, especially with the roller. It just looks so derpy, but it's kind of fun. Obviously, the whole point is to make everything look really suggestive, and they've succeeded, but it does get old. It's quite repetitive. And the developers must have realized that too, since you eventually unlock the ability to skip the minigames. Despite the suggestive nature of the game, the dialogue is more sweet than sexy, which makes sense since Asuka and Yumi are already established characters. If you're a true hardcore gamer, you're probably thinking, hey, these minigames are very similar to the ones in Galgun. And that's true. If you look at my review of Galgun Double Piece from a few years ago, you'll notice some similarities. The PS4 version made heavy use of the touchpad, which reminds me of the motion controls. Not sure if the Galgun minigames served as an inspiration in that regard, but it's an interesting thing to note how similar they are. I bet you none of those mainstream reviewers ever picked up on that. Now is probably a good idea to talk about the HD rumble. It seems to work fine, but it certainly doesn't feel realistic. It's not like it's fooling me into thinking that anything I'm doing on the screen is for real. I think the controller rumbles too much in some occasions. It's like the effect has been exaggerated, which happens a lot with newish technologies. But despite my quibbles, I think Senran Kagura Reflections is better off with HD rumble rather than without. Feedback to the player is always a good thing after all. Let's talk about the graphics. I think the game looks alright. It runs at 60 frames per second. It really doesn't matter from a gameplay perspective if it does or not, but it's nice that it does. And you'd certainly hope the hardware can handle it because there isn't too much going on here. That being said, There are frame rate drops during some of the animations that happen between transitions. A bit surprising, to be honest. The background is always just an illustration, so the only 3D is Asuka or Yumi. The menus are quite well done in my opinion. There's the occasional splash of color, which makes it fun and it's appropriately themed. The 3D models look good and basically are the same as in almost every Senran Kagura game. A lot of the animations look like they're straight out of the cutscenes from the main titles. It would have been nice to see some more new animations. And the lip syncing still looks as awkward as it always has. This is where I think Reflections should have really shined. Other than the suggestive content, the point is to highlight little nuances in character behavior. I think it would have worked better if we saw more new animations rather than just recycling generic animations that literally every character in the franchise has already used in past games. Speaking of recycled, the background music is mostly reused from main title games and cutscenes and menus. There's some new stuff which is nice and it fits the theme. All the other sound effects are appropriate. The voice acting sounds good. I say that even though I can't speak Japanese, but that doesn't seem to stop anyone else on the internet from making remarks. Now let's get a little more in-depth. You can complete the entire game in only a few hours. There's just a few things to note and you'll be sailing through it. Firstly, there are 5 scenarios or arcs per playthrough. After the first playthrough, you unlock a piece of this heart here. Remember how I said that there are different moods? This is where it comes into play. There are 5 different moods, each represented by a color. Touching in different places can result in different moods. Each arc needs to be completed 5 times, 1 for each mood. That seems simple enough, but you also have to do 5 playthroughs, 1 for each mood, to complete the heart. And the vessel meter changes color depending on what mood your last arc was. So it's possible for the vessel to go from, say, green to red or purple. And whatever the color is once it's full, that's the heart piece you're going to unlock. And if you get, say, green twice, you don't unlock any part of the heart the second time. In the touchy-feely hand part of the game, pressing start or plus opens a menu showing you your progress. Makes it easy to figure out what you need to do and what you've done. The best way to do it is to just aim for 1 mood per playthrough. Do that for 5 times and you have all the moods for all of your playthroughs. Then just complete any arcs that you're missing. That way you don't have to deal with the vessel changing colors. Sometimes it can be a bit difficult to figure out where and how to touch because every arc has different moods mapped to different parts of the body. Occasionally you have to rotate the camera around and try the back. Another thing to try is to alternate between the Z buttons and clicking on the analog sticks. There are instances where clicking on the analog sticks gives a different result compared to pressing LZ or RZ. Also, if you're searching for a while and the mood isn't what you want, you can still change it to the desired mood by touching the spot long enough. So you can still keep going even if the little selector has already popped up. Once it's the right color, then play the minigame or skip it. And that's all the info you need to complete the whole game. If you complete an arc, you can play it in mini reflexology, which is just a game mode where you can freely play how you want. One thing I'll say is that it can be a bit tedious to complete everything. The minigames can be skipped, which is nice if you want to just speed through it, but the most annoying thing is the whole selection of the arcs. Feeling Asuka's hands to activate certain arcs takes so long because you have to wait until a thought bubble comes up. There you can see which dream sequence you're about to play, but if it's not the one you want, you have to go to another finger and then hope that one's correct. It ends up feeling like a really slow and tedious menu. If your character's clothing is getting a bit repetitive, you can change her clothes for a bit of variation. From what I can see, it's the usual stuff we're familiar with from all the past games. Nothing really new here. You can change classroom and dream sequence costumes. This only affects mini reflexology, but if you go into the not-so-secret menu in the options, you can use custom outfits in reflexology, which for some reason is the name of the game's story mode. Like always, you can take pictures and pose the girls in all sorts of dodgy positions. And there's DLC too, like I mentioned before. You can get a bunch of different outfits. Again, that's the usual stuff from previous games. There's one pack that's free though, so I recommend getting that. Yumi costs as much as the game basically, which in a way makes sense because you're getting a new character with new arcs, which essentially doubles the content. But it does feel a bit expensive. I didn't end up getting her. I wanted to review the base game for now and I really didn't feel like spending the extra money. I'd like to get the other characters that the Japanese version of the game has. I'm sure we'll get them eventually, but I can't say I'm looking forward to the price. In the end, this is what I think of Senran Kagura Reflections. The franchise has always been about next level fan service, and this game delivers on that front. It might not be the most refined experience ever, and it's really short, but I like it when developers play around and try things with spin-offs. And for around $13 Canadian, I don't think it costs too much. As a fan of the series, I enjoyed it. I'll probably not play it too much, but for the cost, it brought me a sufficient amount of entertainment. And going by the user score on Metacritic, others enjoyed it too. So basically, Reflections just serves as a bit of fun for Senran Kagura fans. Apparently some so-called critics haven't been all that kind to this game, which isn't surprising, but let me just put it this way. When you review a horror movie, you don't mark it down for being scary. So fanservice games shouldn't be marked down on the fact that they have sexual content. Like, that's the point, obviously. It's fine to state an opinion, but a lot of these reviews don't make an effort to take the target audience into consideration, which I think is actually unprofessional and a bit insulting towards that demographic. Which in turn means the article lacks information that a reader who's interested in the game wants to hear. The positive user scores versus the negative scores from the critics simply highlights how out of touch some of these writers are. You could argue that they aren't doing their job. That's my mini rant for today. One day you're going to get an entire video on this topic, believe me. Hopefully this video gave you the information you wanted. Let me know what you think of this game if you have it or have played it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.